This is our informal meeting. We will not take any votes during this meeting. This is purely informational, and I'm glad to see that we have some people here from the public today. Today, we will start with Strategic Priority 1, Student Growth and Achievement for Choice-Filled Futures. The SPI report on Grade 3 Reading on Grade Level. Ms. May.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you today about third grade reading on grade level. So as Mr. Moss pointed out, this aligns with our Strategic Priority 1, Student Growth and Achievement for Choice-Filled Futures. Specifically, we're honing in on Performance Objective B, advancing proficiency in literacy and numeracy through high-quality instruction and support for diverse learners. The KPI of focus for today's presentation is increasing Lexile performance as measured by GMAS, reading on grade level, with a focus on third grade. The importance of reading on grade level cannot be underscored enough, especially when it comes to third grade. Please note that third grade marks that significant transition in learning as students progress from learning to read to reading to learn. Reading proficiency by the end of third grade is a key indicator of a child's educational development. Literacy skills are essential for learning across all subject areas, and over 85% of the curricula currently taught is taught by reading. Reading proficiency is also connected to positive life outcomes and increased opportunities. Students who do not exhibit reading proficiency by the end of third grade have an increased likelihood of dropping out of high school. They're in fact 4 times more likely to do so, and are more likely to experience long-term behavioral and mental health issues. When we look at our Georgia Milestones Assessment, and just to refresh everybody, those are the summative assessments that students complete at the end of our school year. The focus here is the English Language Arts Assessment, because that is where we will find our reading status indicator. GMAS, English Language Arts, ELA, does include domain scores in 2 areas. The first is reading and vocabulary, which is the focus in today's presentation. And the second is writing and language. Reading and vocabulary accounts for 53% of the assessment items, whereas writing and language account for 47%. And just to show you what domain achievement takes into account for reading and vocabulary, it's key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, vocabulary acquisition and use. When it comes to the type of text material that students are asked to read, literary text accounts for 60% of the text that students are exposed to on the ELA assessment, and informational text accounts for the additional 40%. Writing and language, as stated previously, account for that remaining 47% of the overall ELA domain score. Are there any questions? Then with regard to today's presentation, our specific focus is on the GMAS Reading Status Indicator, which is based on the reading and vocabulary portion of the ELA assessment. Our GMAS reading status is indexed for each student as a Lexile score. So reading status, you can see the way it would be denoted on the student's report, and it states very clearly what their Lexile performance level is. So this is a child who has scored within the third grade as reading on grade level or above, and their specific Lexile is a 560. The full range we'll see on the next slide. So it's important to understand Lexile scores and what they indicate. When we measure reading on grade level, We are specifically using the Metametrics Lexile stretch bands that reflect grade level text complexity and measure students' reading ability. So the stretch bands reflect literacy skills that are associated with college and career readiness. And what you'll see is for each of the grade levels, starting at grade 3, you'll see the full range for each grade level. So there is a lower bound and there's an upper bound for each grade level. So for grade 3, the range, the Lexile range for reading on grade level is 520 to 820. So students who score at 519 and below would be scored as reading below grade level for grade 3. Reading status is always reported in that context, either grade level or above or below grade level. So when we look at our students' third grade performance in school year 2024, what we see is that our third graders, on average, scored a 58%. This is a 1% gain over the previous year. As you note in the figure on the right, we are tracking this as one of our critical KPIs, and thus what we hope to attain by the end of school year 25-26 is a 65%. So that is a 7% gain. Third year, so one of the things that we want to focus on when we're looking at third grade is not just that year-over-year comparison, but to present you with a 3-year comparison, looking at 22, 23, and school year 24 data. And we provided for you the comparison with the state, the comparison group, and the district scores are the ones that are highlighted to the right of the screen with the green bars. What you'll see is that in school year 2024, the district outperformed the comparison group by 5%, but still fell below the state by 6%. One thing also to note very clearly about district performance from 22 to 23, 24 is that we are gaining in reading on grade level or above performance. Any questions with regard to this?
Yes, thank you. I think one slide we had, it was talking about the 7% increase that we're reaching for, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Question for you, is that a overreach, an underreach, or a safe reach? If that question makes sense.
That is a challenging and attainable goal. So we never want to just set safe or small goals. We want to continue to challenge our students to thrive academically and to go beyond anyone's expectations. So we're always setting those challenging but appropriate goals. We also didn't want to set the bar to 90%.
Makes
that
sense.
would be excessive and unreasonable.
Understandable. Tell me this, did we set a goal for last year, and did we reach that goal last year?
So with regard to the revision to our strategic plan, that was our time to reset. So when we reset the 65% for the end of this cycle. So the remaining 2 years of our strategic plan.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for all the work. And I know I'm beating a dead horse. This looks great. Question.
Yes, sir.
When we are measuring our charter schools, and we ask them to beat the district, correct?
Yes, sir. That is the contractual
Is it-
expectation.
is it based on this, or is it based on their ELA score, their complete ELA scores?
So everything is specified in their charter contract, and they're the terms that the state has set forward. So it's not going to be exclusive to just a reading status indicator or, in fact, a single ELA performance. It'll be content mastery within the CCRPI that we're looking at, and that will take into account all 4 content areas: English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies.
But they are being measured on the full ELA score, not just the reading and vocabulary part.
Yes, sir, within that context. Yes, because the ELA score is what goes into the calculation of the CCRPI content mastery.
Okay, so if we're going to hold them accountable, why are we not holding ourselves accountable?
I would absolutely agree with you in terms of holding ourselves accountable, and I will politely state that I believe we are holding ourselves accountable. When we present the full GMAS data, we show exactly what our performance levels are on all 4 content areas. We're expecting gains year over year, but when it comes to our strategic plan, we have to see what those specific KPIs are. And as literacy is our North Star, it was critical for us to have a single standalone accountability measure for reading on grade level. If our students are not able to read on grade level, they are not at the level necessary to really attain proficiency in other content areas that are reliant on that reading ability.
Yes, so I'll add, actually, Dr. May and I just talked about this yesterday, as we just did one final pass of this report. So in essence, not to repeat what she just said, we are holding ourselves accountable. Today, we're just presenting on this specific KPI because it is a KPI in our strategic plan. However, in the next couple of days, you all will be getting a full GMAS report, and you will see how our students are faring in terms of their proficiency, which would include all areas: writing, language, vocabulary, and reading.
Correct.
So you will see all of it, but for the purposes of today's meeting, we're just looking at that specific KPI,
Yes.
Okay.
which just focuses on 3rd grade reading. Because I would imagine, again, today's 3rd grade reading, but there should be curiosity about 4th grade and 5th grade and
Yes.
6th grade and 7th grade.
Yes.
So you will be getting all of that.
Okay. So, yeah, I'll make it quick, I promise. Yeah, okay, yeah. No. In general, and I mentioned this in the email that I sent to you guys,
Yes.
that I didn't get a reply on, by the way. But when we just had our financial meeting this morning, one thing that we have to face coming up, the voucher bill
Yes.
goes into effect next year. How our 5% is determined is probably on GMAS, correct?
That is something that, sir, I cannot answer.
I understand, I understand.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
The Governor's Office of Student Achievement
Yeah.
is being tasked with that responsibility solely, so the Georgia Department of Education is unable to give us more
Okay.
clarity on that.
But, okay, so I just want us to be aware of that.
Yes, sir.
And have a keener eye on those GMAS scores. I'm the last person that's for teaching to a test, but it's the reality. So, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll just keep saying it. The comparison group, unless we're comparing our district to all of the state of Georgia or the nation, I really don't care. Because our students aren't only up against students from districts that have the same amount of poverty or any of the, our students are up against everyone. And I truly believe that our students can compete. And I want that, when we're looking at the measurement and we're looking at a true strategic plan, if we are going to be our goal is to be one of the best school systems, not only in the state of Georgia, in the nation. And so when we are looking at these things, I want to see where are we and how much closer can we get?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely understood and concur with you. And in fact, that's why you see the state data. One thing I do want to point out to everybody, when you look at the state performance from 23 to 24, they actually dropped by 2%, where we continue to make gains. So I think the future is bright for our students continuing to make those gains, especially with the focus and the tremendous support of the board in helping us really have the resources necessary to fund the various literacy initiatives and to have the highest quality resources available for our students.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown, then Ms. Kowalski.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to kind of unpeel some of your thinking on the accountability with outcomes and literacy with the charters and with the district to kind of see what your thought process was. Charters have asked to be excused from the traditional model, the state mandated model, to use their own model, however they have designed it. And so we hold them accountable for that exceptionality if you want to do it differently. And some of them do extraordinary things, others are emerging. We have a mandated model that we use, and we have the accountability as was described by Dr. May and the superintendent. I guess my question for you is, what are you seeing as us inequitably addressing accountability between our work and the charter? Where are we not
So
doing that?
if we are going to require charters to beat the district, it's and using GMAT scores as opposed to just using, as we said today, the reading on grade level scores.
But, okay, so
And by the way,
what?
I agree with it. I just want us, when we're presenting this and when we're talking to the charters and telling them you are not doing something, that we're also saying neither are we.
Well, okay, so I wouldn't argue with you on that. I think we've been consistently demonstrating our humility in that process. We don't have the luxury of selectivity. We get everybody where they are, and our job is to get them where they need to be using any of the interventions that we have, at our disposal. So I understand what you're saying, and this is probably a bigger conversation because I see what you're saying about how it's being measured. I don't see how we're not holding ourselves accountable, but I also realize that we all have different points of view, and maybe I have a blind spot in that area that you can help me see. And so I'm happy to chat about it. Yeah, thank you.
And one thing that I'd like to point out too is our charter Chevron reports do show a direct comparison for each of our charter schools versus the district, specifically in ELA and mathematics. So making it very clear that we are very forthright. All of our reports include every single one of our schools, but they also include every single one of our charter schools. And as per the request, the charter schools have been integrated into the grade level appropriate, if you will, in the report. Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay. Dr. Howard Hall. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Grabowski, then Dr. Howard Hall.
Two things real quick. On the data, Do we have the ability to look at cohorts of students who did or did not attend either pre-K or kindergarten? I know it's not a perfect data set, especially for students that we receive, but do we have some way to get some sense of academic and reading performance around that?
We have done those supplemental reports as possible. As we move further away from kindergarten, it becomes more difficult.
Well,
to
I guess I'm
capture that
thinking
data and
particularly
have
for
it
third
tracked.
grade, because it seems to me that at third grade, that the distinction would be the most clear. So
Correct.
I'm wondering if we have that for our third graders.
It would be something that we would have to look into further and do a
Okay.
custom report. So it's not something that is readily available and already.
Okay,
done.
well, I think depending on, because it's something that we as a board have spoken, and we're investing
Yes.
in our early
Absolutely.
learners at our
Understood.
own local expense. And so, and we know all the studies and all the data that talks about the importance of early learning.
Yes.
So if it's, if it makes sense to customize a report, I think it could be very valuable if that's something that the superintendent
For the third grade.
feels is appropriate for our district. And then my second is really just a comment. I feel like every time we look at this type of data, we talk about the comparison group and whether or not we should or shouldn't use a comparison group. There's pros and cons, just like anytime you're looking at
Correct.
data like this. I agree, we are, competing with the state, the nation, and the world when we talk about our students and they go out into the workforce. But I think the value in the comparison group, and this is something that I think we have to constantly educate ourselves and our community on, is the value in the comparison group brings in externalities that are beyond control of the district, yet have a direct impact on
Correct.
academic performance.
Yes.
So to not be mindful of those externalities, I think, is a disservice to our students and to
Correct.
our families in understanding the community responsibility and addressing those external factors that do, in fact, impede student learning. It is not in any way to say it's an excuse or a crutch or anything else. It is a reality. And the more that we can continue to have a broader conversation about how those externalities affect our students, I think it can be valuable. So, thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall, then Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I have more of a comment. We had a robust discussion this morning regarding ROI, return on investments, as well as program evaluation. And that will serve as an indicator, a data-driven indicator, whether or not we're going to meet those goals. When you look at the third grade reading, that's a 7% gain that we are expecting to meet during the year of 2026. So honing in on the program evaluation and return on investments, that serves as the main purpose of us being able to reach those goals and determine whether or not the program that we are implementing is successful.
Mr. Johnson.
I don't know if you have it later in your slideshow here about who's actually in the comparison group.
Yes.
You do?
So here is that.
Okay, do you also have on there the regional comparison as well?
You had put in the request for the neighboring districts, and we have that data to provide you.
Okay, and I know there's always questions of why I request that information, and that's because I know that demographically, we're not the same. I understand their size, district size, how the breakdown is and everything. However, the district's still going to say, if I live 5 minutes down the road, my kid's going to be in a better school district because of what they see on test scores. They're not going to say, hey, well, if I can live 4 hours down the road in Atlanta and be in the same demographic. So the public looks at it differently, so I just wanted to make sure that we see where we are regionally, because that's what the public's looking at when they move into an area. But I do understand the benefit of comparison groups to see what other districts are that are like size, similar demographic breakdown. But as what President Moss was saying, we're competing on a state level. We also need to know those numbers as well. So if we're able to compete and beat the numbers of a comparison group and a regional group and the state numbers, we know we're doing well.
Anyone else? Dr. Greenwood.
Could we, and sorry if I can't remember, and maybe my board members will help me. We had our attendance report. Yeah, I literally was wearing my Miss School, Miss Out shirt the other day. I was like, so as our one other thing to compare, we're comparing demographics here. Attendance is an issue. It definitely is an issue, if I remember correctly, more for us than it is in certain areas of the state. Do we have the ability to tease out reading on grade level based on attendance?
Yes, right? Yes.
And,
Yeah, we can.
okay, thank you.
The customer report, yep.
And can we add in our demographic, whatever comparison group you want, and we can have 10 different comparison groups, are some of the areas that are doing better, do they have better attendance than us? Like, we're looking at things, I don't know, but we definitely have an issue there. So, thank you.
Duly noted, we'll do a follow-up board member report.
So I want to respond to what Ms. Grabowski said. What I would rather do, if we're going to do the demographic thing, let's find those high poverty, well-performing schools and find out what they're doing. Because basically what we're doing with this comparison group is based on income. So, and I just don't like that assumption, but Miss Dr. Brinkman.
I mean, we talk about this every time we talk about anything where we use comparison groups. Study after study after study has shown that your zip code from birth to about 20 dictates almost everything in your life. Health, wealth, education. I'm not using that as a scapegoat. I don't think the district uses it as a scapegoat. It's just when we look at certain comparison groups, they are sometimes, can't correlate 100%, dealing with some of the same issues that we may or may not be dealing with that lead to your zip code dictating a lot of your life. I don't think the district uses it as an excuse, but it definitely just is something to help us understand where we're at. And when other board members have said, let me get the local comparison groups, I think the district has done a great job of saying, hey, and here's what we are surrounded by countywide. So I don't think we're trying to, move the cups around so you can't follow things. I think we're just, here's the bigger picture. Somebody said, hey, are we looking at attendance? And so I asked the question, are we looking at attendance? Because that's another variable now that unfortunately before COVID wasn't really an issue. I mean, attendance was, we were, I think, better than the state. It was one of the few, we're like 90% or something, if I remember correctly. So, and now those numbers are abysmal. But now it is, I think, part of the bigger picture of, I think I said 2 board meetings ago, now we have to make sure you attend school and feed you at school and counsel you at school and, besides just education. So, we can talk about it every time, but it's just data that helps us make decisions.
Dr. Hall.
Just one last
Howard Hall.
point and I usually bring this up all the time. Chatham County has the most private schools than any county in the state of Georgia. So when you look at demographics and you compare the percentage of private schools in Chatham as opposed to the percentage of private schools in our surrounding counties, it has a big impact on demographics right there overall.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
So let's just throw in statistics while we're at it, because what we're talking about, when we talk about exceptionalities, when we talk about really, really high-performing schools where there are high-performing students where there's high poverty, that is the far extent of a bell-shaped curve. That's an exceptionality. That's not a statistical commonality. So when we have our whole district, that's the whole curve. We're dealing with everybody in that distribution. When you have a lot of private schools, when you have a lot of choice programs, when you have charter schools, you start pulling students out of that large bell curve and they get into the polls. And so it's very difficult to make statements about what interventions would occur in that larger distribution of students that's going to generate these trends of high poverty schools where they don't have all of those over choices because you've pulled all of those students out. And so what we're dealing with when we are looking at some of our data is we're looking at individuals that we do have exceptionalities. We do have gifted and wonderful, talented students throughout our district, but we have a system that we have built that has pulled all kinds of diversity out of our system and put them in pockets that we see these trends of performance. And then we treat our large data like everybody's in the melting pot, and they're not. So it's not necessarily about poverty. It's not necessarily about race. It's a lot about privilege. Who has the privilege to be able to get to one program or one school or another? Who has the privilege to go to a private school? Who has the privilege to have transportation to a choice school? So these comparison schools, our comparison groups, I want us to remember they're not replicates. They're not exact replicates of Savannah that we're comparing. They're not entirely comparable. They're just the closest thing that we can compare based on the size of the community and the number of students and the number of schools.
I'm gonna, one more thing, and then we're gonna go on. I'm so sorry. Yes, we do have all of that. We have choice, we have private schools, we have charter schools, and I'm glad we do. Glad we do. For families, I think that's wonderful. They get to make the decisions where they send their kids to school. I do not believe that the kids left in our schools, I think there is a wealth of talent left in our schools.
Oh, okay. I don't
Okay,
want people writing me
no,
saying
no, no,
that
hang
I
on.
said that there was no talent left
No,
in our
no,
schools.
no,
Okay,
no,
so
but
do
what,
not-
no.
That's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
what I was saying.
Okay.
Okay.
When I say let's look at schools, because there are some schools there are some high poverty schools that are not charter schools in the state of Georgia and nationwide that are doing well. Let's look at them and find out what's the sauce. I just, we're going to do better. This morning we were talking about ROI. We spend almost, and I know this includes facilities, we spend almost $1 billion. So to the public, when they look at ROI, what are we saying? And I am so glad we're going to be looking at our programs again, because we do need to make sure that the programs that we use are effective. Look, we're going to continue to do these comparison groups, and it's fine. And I just wanted to go on the record and say I don't believe in it. It's all good. Continue. I'm so sorry.
No. So as a nice segue into wrapping up the data portion, what you see before you are the subgroup comparisons with regard to their performance, third grade reading on grade level. And you will see how many are in fact exceeding that mean of 58%. That's very notable, and it really shows across the board, even those who are not quite at our mean, they've all been making gains. I cannot underscore enough the amount of effort and the gratitude that I have for our teachers and the effort that our students have placed into trying to meet our high expectations of them and doing their best to continue to learn and grow. So now I turn the floor over to our District Literacy Effectiveness Officer.
Thank you so much. So bringing us back to the strategic plan and that performance objective B, advancing proficiency in literacy and numeracy through high-quality instruction and support for diverse learners, we are honing in on that KPI related to Lexile performance as measured by GMAS with reading on grade level. And our key literacy strategies for the coming school year include implementing our comprehensive literacy plan based on the science of reading to improve reading proficiency. So that involves enhancing our teacher capacity to deliver rigorous and standard-aligned instruction. As I spoke with you all about at the board retreat, as we construct our plan in order to meet those goals, we want to function within a universal system for literacy. That's recognizing that there is not one single magic bullet for this problem. It is an issue that we are going to be dealing with for a while in order to meet the needs of our students and to get our teachers where they need to be in order to have the success that we want to see. And what that takes is various components that work together in a universal system in order to create transformation and systematic development. We want to put in place supports that elevate the strengths and that exist and address our weaknesses that are existing. We also want to make sure that we're looking across schools and grade bands and roles of responsibility, because we recognize that the systems and supports that we might need to provide within each of these components for a universal system of literacy, they might be different depending on the school or the grade band or the role of responsibility. We are required to provide constant monitoring so that we can refine our implementation towards sustainability. And that is a gradual process. And overall, we want to make sure that our organization is aligned on its purpose and its mission and the execution, so that bringing all those pieces together are integral for success. When we look at our current challenges, which include shifts in literacy instructional practices in grades K through 2, also our percentage of students who are still reading below grade level, and then our subgroup reading proficiency, including our students with disabilities and our English learners, the opportunities that we're really honing in on within those cogs, within this universal system for literacy, are, first of all, our comprehensive professional development. That involves the letters training that our teachers are going through in order so that they can better understand the science of reading and the optimal ways in which students learn how to read and the strategies that we can use to meet their needs. Then also our other additional opportunity is the high-quality Tier 1 in literacy instruction that involves the adoption of our into-reading instructional materials in order to support what our teachers are learning about the science of reading so that they have the best and most effective tools in the classroom. And then lastly, we have our literacy intervention instruction, and what we are doing there is based on the universal screeners that our students just took at the beginning of the school year. We are identifying our students that are at risk for a significant reading deficiency, and those students are being put on tiered reading intervention plans in order to meet the needs of those students, identifying the specific reading deficiency that they have based on the pillar of reading that they're struggling with, whether it's phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension, and really identifying the specific interventions that will address those specific areas that the students are struggling with. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yes.
Ms. Grabowski.
So I love that individualized approach and being able to capture the challenges very early. Do we, as the year goes on, I know obviously that GMAS is offered again, but is that screening, that I assume that screening is different? And then do we do it again at the end of the year to understand the impact? Like, how do we capture the impact of those interventions?
Right. So our students, all of our students in grades K through 3 are required to take the Universal Reading Screener, which is a MIRA. And students take that at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. That's all students in grades K through 3. The students who are having the tiered intervention plans, we do progress monitoring on those students on a regular basis to identify whether or not the interventions that they are receiving are, whether they are making progress or not. And if they are making progress, if there are other areas of need that we've identified, we begin to implement those interventions. And if we identify that they've made significant progress, then we can transition them off of an intervention plan.
Mr. Johnson?
I appreciate the information, and I know you're intimately aware of teacher burnout.
Yes, I'm very aware.
Just a little bit. I just want to make sure that when we go through this professional development, that we're not doing it at a time when they should be doing other things. That way, we're not putting too much on the teacher's plate and staff's plate in order to make sure that, just to say that we got it done. I want it to be thoughtful through the entire process of the professional development. And you, when you were doing your explanation of the screening process, you hit a nerve with me, and I know that a couple of people that I was talking to during the break, they're like, she said the word, a mirror. The idea of it, I love the idea of it to help teachers through the screening process. I still do not believe the technology is there. I know it improves every year, every time it gets used. However, I still get complaints from parents today that if they have a strong dialect because of the communities that they're in, a mirror still can't get what they're trying to say. And I know the teacher can go through and say, they said it correctly, but that takes time away from the teacher to really do that focus on other students who actually need the help than trying to fix a computer program that's supposed to be able to do it. So in theory, a mirror is phenomenal. In practice, I wish there was something better. And I just wanted to say that on the record.
Yes, if I could take a step back to the comment that you made about the burnout and the professional development, we definitely hear you loud and clear on that, and it's most definitely something very on the forefront of my mind when I think about our professional development. Recognizing that, yes, the professional learning that our teachers are doing right now with respect to letters, with respect to HMH, it's a lift. And we are trying to support our teachers as best we can through that process, recognizing that the investment on the front end is going to have a big payoff on the back end. I think that one of the reasons why some of our teachers are so burned out is because they don't have the right tools and the right training. So they're spinning their wheels trying to intervene and try to support students who aren't being successful. And there are a lot of things that contribute to burnout, but I do believe that that's one of those things. So yes, this is a lift, but I do believe that we're doing it right, and we're doing it in a way so that teachers can internalize and apply what they're learning from their professional development on both letters and into reading, so that ultimately that burden will be lifted off of them when their students are more successful. With respect to Amira, yes, I hear your concerns. I know that there are frustrations with Amira. We do work with our teachers consistently to help them implement it in the classroom, implement it as they're screening as best as possible, so that we minimize the kind of situations that you are talking about. But yes, I do hear your concerns.
I appreciate it, and I want to say thank you for the professional development aspect of it. Because I know that you're on it and you kind of help develop with some of this stuff. So I know you understand the teacher burnout, so I do appreciate all the effort that you and Academic Affairs are putting into it.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, thank you. What are we doing to bridge the gap between pre-K and kindergarten, knowing that some students enter kindergarten without pre-K or without the three-year-old programs or any type of instruction? So when they're in kindergarten, are you, for a teacher, for example, she may have some students who are reading sight words and others who aren't identifying colors. So what are you doing to bridge that gap? Is the teacher instructed to do ability grouping at times, or exactly what's going on with that? Because I'm realizing that there is really a significant gap between those students who have had no instruction.
Right.
No
I think there are a few things that we're doing to address the pre-K piece, and I think that some of it's internal and some of it's external. So internally, our pre-K teachers, they are starting letters for early childhood educators this year. And so that is going to give those teachers the foundation that they need in the science of reading to make sure that our pre-K students are even better prepared to go into kindergarten and be more successful in kindergarten. When we're talking about externally, we are working with community partners that are involved in training pre-K and preschool teachers and beginning to have dialogue with them about the training that those teachers are having, things like the language as a missing link to make sure that oral language development is being done properly so that then when those students come into school that they are more successful. So we're starting to build those relationships and become involved in those conversations so that we make sure that the students that come to us from outside the district are better prepared. And then in terms of our current kindergarten teachers, when they get that blend of students, part of the professional development that they get is understanding that progression of that progression of child development, and then also the stages in which students are in their language development, so that they can recognize it, so that then they know which tools to apply in the classroom, so that they can differentiate in order to meet the needs of those students.
And also making sure that they're not confusing it with a learning disability at an early age, because a lot of it could be developmentally.
Yes, so radars are definitely up for that in order to make those kinds of differentiations. No, turn it over to Mr. Butler.
And I'll do my very best. Great morning. I think it is still morning. Do my best to close this out for us rather quickly. So we are seeing improvement in third grade reading performance, but as you've noted, we still have work to do to ensure every student is able to meet and or exceed those targets. I do want to provide some clarification or just emphasize that while we saw that 6-point percentage increase for 2026, and certainly is a challenging but attainable goal. Our goal for this school year is a 3-point percentage increase. So just wanted to make sure that I provided some context for that. But we certainly are, it's a critical point for us in our literacy efforts. You've already heard from Ms. Goldman as she highlighted those 3 core opportunities as we zoom in on those COGS, and we certainly will be leveraging those to address those identified challenges. As you can see here, to ensure we're continuing to make gains, we have prioritized 3 areas, one of them being Tier 1 literacy instruction, and that is taking place through our 120 to 150-minute literacy block for all of our K-5 classrooms, and certainly we're talking about our third grade group here, but certainly wanted to highlight the importance of that Tier 1 instruction, where we'll continue to focus on those essential pillars through Scarborough's reading rope for those foundational skills. I do want to note here, you see the piece around writing. That is also happening in that Tier 1 literacy instructional block. In the first marking period, our teachers focused heavily on foundational skills. And as we move into the second marking period, our teachers will continue to build upon that, focus on scaffolding through small group supports, and through and I'll emphasize that here again, just for the sake of our conversation, through Writers' Workshop as well, because that is happening in Tier 1 instruction. The scaffolding is supported by high-quality resources. You heard Ms. Goldman talk about Into Reading with HMH, but that also is taking place through the use of Amira, iReady, and Just Right reader decodable books that are designed to support and facilitate small group support and address those progression of skills. Additionally, you've heard Ms. Goldman already highlight the work happening with our comprehensive professional development plan approach. This includes, and do want to highlight, the emphasis around our core instructional materials, which is Into Reading at our K-5 level. Teachers have we're excited about this because teachers have access to on-demand learning pathways and on-site coaching. In fact, every school in the district has received at least 1 day of on-site support this marking period. Additional coaching days are being assigned. But what we're really excited about is the one-on-one coaching that is available for teachers. through the platform called Coachly. This is in addition to the coaching support that teachers are receiving through our school academic coaches as well as our district literacy specialists, which has been part of the restructure and a very strategic approach to prioritize support around literacy. While you certainly see here, and I won't go into details about the letters training, you heard Ms. Goldman talk a little bit about that earlier. I do want to highlight that our approach to sustaining this work is through our train the trainer model. Those additional teachers, credentialed letters facilitators that will be able to, as part of our continued cohorts, be able to provide and facilitate that support for our new teachers and for continued professional development. As it relates to the community and family engagement, let me go back for just a moment to talk about our team. And I know that Ms. Goldman is here and she's been doing some work, but I do want to acknowledge our entire academic affairs team that has been really prioritizing that support, our curriculum instruction directors, our literacy specialists, our content specialists, our MTS performing low as compared to their peers. And so we are really focusing on building the capacity of our teacher teams to provide specially designed instruction for students with disabilities. And this is really focusing on what the teacher does to bridge that gap between a student's present level of performance and their grade level expectation. And so our teams, our district teams, our site-based teams are really prioritizing what that looks like in terms of, as you saw one of our challenges, that shift in instructional practices. We know that that's a part of the ongoing professional development that is needed to ensure that we're addressing those unique needs of our students. The same is true for our English language students as well. Our ESOL department has been restructured to ensure that we are able to provide layered support and professional development. And so those teams, along with individuals in those schools, are able to provide that service. You may remember, obviously, that our students have returned to their zone schools where they have the ease of access and they have that wraparound support. So that has certainly been something that we've prioritizing and monitoring in terms of its efficiency and effectiveness. And I'll close with this as it relates to program evaluation. And I'll zoom back up to the Mirror and iReady. It's just two of those pieces that we are prioritizing as part of our program evaluation. But certainly those are things that we are, in terms of our core opportunities that we're leveraging to support our students in ensuring that they're reading on grade level. At this time, we'll take any questions. Great job, Dr. May and Ms. Goldman.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Thank you very much. Okay. Go time? Okay, all right. Okay. We have 10 minutes for student discipline.
All right. So our focus for this presentation is student discipline. It also aligns with strategic priority 1, student growth and achievement for choice-filled futures. And the KPI of focus here is under performance objective D, which is designed to provide high-quality support and services for whole child development. And what we're looking for is decreasing student behavior referrals and incidents as measured by the weighted suspension rate. This focuses on grades 6 through 12. Student discipline is something that is of national attention, and student discipline policies and practices are viewed as a critical part of a school's overall climate. The United States Department of Education believes the following: all students deserve access to welcoming, supportive, and safe schools. Successful School climate and student discipline involves setting up all students for success by the following: meeting their academic, social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs, and ensuring schools have the necessary tools to assist students with addressing any behaviors that could otherwise interfere with their or others' learning or otherwise impact school safety. When we look at how discipline is reported by the Georgia Department of Education, we see that it is reported as a weighted value based on the number of in-school suspensions, abbreviated ISS, out-of-school suspensions, OSS, alternative placement, or expulsion referrals, and these are all reported in our student information system, PowerSchool. These calculate out to be the weighted suspension rate. So the sum of weighted values is divided by total grade band, subgroup, or school enrollment, depending what level we are assessing. Pre-K is excluded from the numerator, but it is included in the denominator, the total enrollment count. The weighted value for each discipline action is presented in the table on the right. So you see the weighted values range from a 0 to a 7.0, with the most severe action being expulsion. Any questions? All right. So for school year 2024, our weighted suspension rate for grades 6 through 12 was 21.40. This marks a decrease of 0.20 points from school year 2023. School level weighted suspension rate for students in grades 6 through 12 did range from a 0.70 at Savannah E-Learning Academy to a 57.07 at Oglethorpe Charter School. The most prevalent referrals for the district were student incivility, fighting, disorderly conduct, and attendance-related referrals, which have to do with excessive tardies and skipping school. So when we look across all grade bands, what we saw in school year 2024 was a decrease when we compare those numbers to 2023, with the sole exception being the middle grades. For grades 6 through 8, there was a 2.20 increase in the weighted suspension rate in school year 2024. In contrast, high school weighted suspension rate decreased by 2.1. When we look at subgroup data, school year 2024 weighted suspension rate contains several notable group differences, especially when you compare the middle grades versus high school. Male students have higher weighted suspension rates than female students. Economically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities have higher weighted suspension rates. And Black and multiracial students have higher weighted suspension rates than any other racial or ethnic counterpart.
So as part of strategic priority 1, performance objective D, provide high quality support and services for the whole child. Our KPIs to decrease student behavior, referrals, and incidents as measured by the weighted suspension rate. Our key strategic approach will be to enhance those wraparound support services and to establish a positive and supportive culture. And so our tactical approach is to leverage 3 core opportunities. That first being student belonging and well-being. This approach is led by our school leaders as they prioritize and cultivate school climates and environments that promote strong student culture and instructional practice and success. And so this means that ensuring that each of our students are feeling supported, valued, and challenged to meet high expectations. And so each of our schools is facilitating this in their unique ways and varying programs. We certainly want to be able to highlight some of those. But I do want to emphasize that in middle grades, as you noted in the data, we are placing a priority emphasis on how we individualize student support through individualized touch points and small group supports. We'll be using our school deans and discipline leads to take more of a proactive approach. While in some cases that may have been the opposite, where we have simply been responding and using those positions and persons, not maximizing them in the way that they should be designed. So we'll be providing support for those deans to be able to do that. As part of our layered approach, this also includes our school counselors, really focusing on providing those small group supports as well for students. That additional layer includes using the Wellness Center. We've seen an increase in the use of the Wellness Center by our schools, and in some cases by our parents. That has played a central role in providing those wraparound support services, and again, as that being part of that holistic approach for student well-being and belonging. Finally, there is an intentional effort on schools prioritizing student participation and engagement in activities outside of the classroom. We know that when our students feel connected and they're involved and have meaningful opportunities beyond the classroom, that truly helps build a connection and gives them an opportunity to have a positive experience. And so that is the other piece that our schools are doing, really prioritizing and being intentional in engaging students beyond the classroom. Now let's talk about the responsive approach to student discipline. Our goal really is our approach is to really ensure consistency across schools in how discipline is managed. That is something that has been observed, that's something that we've heard. And to do this, our Office of School Leadership is really focused on not only the support, but the accountability around that. And so there'll be some calibration of our code of conduct so that all schools are aligned in their disciplinary practices and that we are assigning appropriate progressive discipline along the way. And this, really is about striking a balance and really around how we improve and correct behavior. So that is really the first step or the continued work that we'll be doing in terms of calibration to ensure that consistency across schools. One of the other ways that we're working to really operationalize our response and support of student discipline is through our partnership. You heard someone earlier talk about our partnership with the Mediation Center. They are continuing, but really refining what that partnership and that support looks like to provide support around conflict resolution and positive peer mediation. The focus really is on building the capacity of our staff to facilitate this. And so that looks like professional development, working with our school deans, our discipline leads, our teacher leads, our assistant principals, so that, again, we're striking that balance and helping students, striking the balance for our leaders in terms of how they respond to discipline, but also helping our students develop those skills to resolve disputes. And while we noted that the biggest incidents were student incivility, attendance-related matters, we also know that those physical altercations is something that we certainly are mindful of and we want to address in the Mediation Center. And that work that's happening in schools is certainly prioritized to help address some of those issues. Talked about the capacity of those teachers and leaders. and through that professional development. The additional piece that we'll do, we know that for our first-year teachers, that classroom management, and I know first-year teachers, but certainly for many of our teachers, that certainly may be a challenge. So we are prioritizing and ensuring that consistency in terms of expectations for classroom management. So our professional learning department has prioritized a professional learning series around classroom management, with that first layer being for our first-year teachers. Finally, certainly you've heard this on several presentations. We cannot underscore the importance of that communication and family partnership, which is a huge part of reducing behavior incidents through our active communication with families. But what does that look like? We recognize that this is a challenge, certainly for our middle schools and our high schools. It is, that those discipline challenges are more pronounced at that level. But our schools are prioritizing those parent partnerships and being intentional in terms of creating those opportunities, those spaces, and the invitation to have those conversations. We know that those things are difficult, but we are prioritizing not only the support, but the accountability and the partnership with parents to help sort of facilitate, design in some cases, when we talk about our middle school students, what those individualized support plans might look like to support and address some of those challenges. And so we'll be leveraging our parent partnerships in addition to the additional communication around what those expectations are. And all of this is really interconnected, because when we go back and talk about calibration around our schools and how they apply the code of conduct, that is the piece that we certainly will come up in our communication and our partnership with parents. So those are our three core opportunities, with really a focus on both a proactive approach, how we respond to student discipline, and then, of course, our parent partnership. This time, we'll take any questions.
Mr. Johnson?
Appreciate the report from all of y'all. Got a couple of questions. One, when it comes to the students with disability and how their numbers across, no matter which grade band it is, are higher than some of the other ones. Is that a training or personal development issue with that, or is it just because it's a small number of people within student, a small number of sample group because it's just one with students with disabilities? Or do we know why that is, that students with disabilities are having such a high rate of weighted suspension rates?
Yeah. So we recognize that that certainly is a challenge, and part of our approach, again, is how are we leveraging those individual support plans based on those students' exceptionalities and disabilities. We certainly know that those are the things that for our students with disabilities becomes a greater challenge. But you're right in that I don't know if that is an anomaly, but it is a challenge that we've acknowledged and that we're addressing through strategically how we improve those behavior support plans for individual students.
And kind of on with that, because we saw from the last report with the reading on grade level rates for students with disabilities, do we think that maybe those that are have the weighted suspension rate is due, like the ones that are constantly getting referrals, constantly getting rated up, do we know if if they have the literacy and numeracy on grade level or below? Because I know that at least when I was in school, those kids that were having the most problems academically were also the ones who were usually acting out in class as well.
Yeah, and I would say that that's not unique to just our students with disabilities. In many cases, when students are not engaged. We see that they tend to display inappropriate behaviors or act out. Certainly that may be pronounced with our students with disabilities when we talk about those academic challenges that they're experiencing, to include literacy and reading on grade level. But it's certainly not unique to just our students with disabilities, as we see that when students are not engaged in many cases, which is a part of our strategic approach to prioritize that, we see that students will tend to engage in inappropriate behaviors.
One last question is, I know that part of the referrals and the weighted suspension rate has to do with attendance. Do we see a larger number of referrals on that end when it comes to the charter schools and the choice programs because we don't provide transportation versus the zone schools, or do you not have that information with you?
I do not, but I do want to go back and emphasize that the attendance-related referrals are generally for students who are either skipping school or they may be tardy to class, right? Not just tardy to school.
Okay.
So those things may happen when those students arrive on campus, but that's certainly some data that we can take a look at as it relates to students reporting to school tardy to school late, which certainly may impact our charter schools and others. Was that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is, I'm intrigued by Mr. Johnson's question about students with disabilities and their number of referrals. I would be curious to know whether or not we see a pattern in our manifestation hearings and the suspension rate. Because if I understand correctly, if a child is being disciplined for something that is a manifestation of their disability, then they don't get the discipline referral. Is that the case? We address the issue, and you have to have a manifestation hearing to know that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So if the number of manifestation hearings, if we plotted the number of manifestation hearings over the discipline referrals for students with disabilities, I'm curious to know what that would look like. Are we still having the same number of manifestation hearings? Or are parents not asking for them? We're not getting them, and so instead the kids are getting referred when we're actually seeing a manifestation of the disability that's not being addressed in whatever their plan is. So I don't know the answer, but I'm just curious about that number going up, because if you do have a disability and that number is going up, then that number is supposed to say you did something and it wasn't your disability.
Yes.
And we need that to really be true. Otherwise, we have young people that need more help that we're not helping. So I was curious. Thank you for asking that question.
And to clarify, parents don't have to ask for a manifestation. That
Okay.
should be automatically happening regardless of if a parent asks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so outside of young people with disabilities, referrals seem generally less than they were 10 years ago, and I'm just kind of remembering experiences that Mr. Kachmar has referred to in the past where we used to see a lot more and now we don't see quite as much. So are children changing, or are professionals changing? Are we not referring things? And see, I
They'd be happening at the
recognize I
same
got you
time.
on the spot. You don't necessarily know. Okay, so this is a philosophical question. Are we changing how we refer discipline, or are young people responding to the supports that we have in place? And, you think there's both?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I also think, and I'll add another piece, I think that our schools, and this is the continued work as it relates to those systems and structures in schools, acknowledging that there are challenging behaviors. And so what do we do to create the conditions and to help mitigate, when possible and at all possible, students who recognize that these are the ways that I can engage in inappropriate behavior. So schools are obviously continuing to think about and refine their systems and their practices around that. And that's part of the work that our leaders are doing in terms of their regular discipline data reviews, which is inclusive of not just student data, but also what are those practices and processes that are happening in schools so that they can strengthen those.
I think that's a notable observation. I mean, if you take the example of something like restorative justice, if you do something, you get in trouble and you get punished, you take the punishment and you come back, you're like, okay, I survived the punishment. Versus if you go through a restorative justice process, there's this education process and reflection that changes your point of view on when that opportunity comes up, am I going to necessarily react that same way? So I think you're right what you're saying about processes. So thanks. Those are my questions.
Dr. Brinkman and then Ms. Grabowski.
I just want to say thank you to the district for working on, again, such a difficult piece of the puzzle. And again, we're educators, but we also have to be behavior modifiers and restorative justice enablers. And I was sitting here listening to it, and I just was like, let me go back to middle school. Let's go down memory lane. And I was at Bartlett, and I would love to see the numbers, but Bartlett was exactly, there you go, Dr. Hassan-Brown made the face. Bartlett was the trouble. And I can't believe that at that time, in the early 90s, people of higher education thought, yeah, let's take all of these troubled children, separate them, and put them on one hall, because that was the model. It was the all-boys crew. And now 30 years later, I look back at that and I'm like, my God, we were not 40. like that literally was the prison, the pipeline of prison. Like that was the model. I was like, how did we think that was the right model? So I know we've gone, like that's the far, and if we're going on a bell-shaped curve, that's like 20 standard deviations in the wrong direction of what we used to do as a district. Just take all the troublemakers, they stayed on one hall in Bartlett, that building hasn't changed, and they never left. And they pretty much were marched to lunch, marched back, and yeah, I'm glad we don't do that now, because it didn't work. So thank you again for just doing something that every time we probably find a little bit of the secret sauce, something's going to change in society that sauce doesn't work or that seasoning doesn't work. And another thing happens, and who knows what will follow up after social media to become the next thing that makes behavior even harder to manage. So just thank you again. Thank your team, because it's difficult enough to do it as a parent, but to do it as somebody that has to do it for a vast majority of children. Thank you to all the teachers, behavior specialists at each school. It takes the whole village of our school to make this work. Thank you.
Ms. Grabowski.
Ditto, thank you for all the work and the very proactive approaches you're taking. Poor middle schoolers. It's such a hard time as a student. And obviously that's where much of our focus is, which I think is great. I'm curious, that's also one of the areas we've struggled with school performance is with our middle schools. And this is before I was on the board, but I think when we shifted some of our schools to K-8, part of that thinking was to try and address the academic side. So I'm curious on the discipline side, if we see a difference in our middle schoolers that are at K-8 schools versus our middle schoolers that are at only middle schools. And there might be too many variables in there to make it, but I'm just curious if you see any difference.
We can take a look at that.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, again, thank you for your report. My question is, I guess maybe a comment, with our self-contained teachers, our new teachers that are self-contained, K through third at the least, are we ensuring that the administrators are being fair with placement? Because one way to burn a new teacher out is to pack her class with students that are known to be, have discipline issues. I've seen it happen in, during the time when I taught, how a lot of times a new teacher, she has the group that's the struggling group, a lot of behavior problems, and then they're burnt out. And then also my next question is, do we see a significant impact with having our dean of students in our middle schools and high schools?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll answer that latter question first. And so that's part of the tactical approach is to provide them, our deans, behavior specialists, some of them have some different titles, but essentially their work is the same, is to provide them with some professional development to ensure that they are being proactive, that they're equipped to facilitate those kind of supports rather than serve as, in some cases, an additional administrator, right? And so I think helping build their capacity is part of the strategic approach that we're taking with our deans. Our deans are serving at our middle schools and our high schools. Not all of those schools have those positions, but as you can see with our middle school data, it's certainly an area where we have to continue to prioritize. And so as we look at that data, that certainly was something that we lifted in terms of what we needed to leverage in terms of their support. As it relates to our self-contained classes, I certainly am not able to speak specifically to that question, but what I will say is that certainly the placement in those classes certainly happen for based on those students' IEPs, and so certainly we can take a look at situations where that may be happening to make sure that that leader has the capacity to provide that support in terms of that master scheduling.
Mr. Johnson?
Sorry, last quick thing. If you go back one slide, and that very last bullet point is probably one of the most important ones as well. Not only that's not just clear expectations with the students and the families and the community, but also with teachers and administrators, and just making sure that when referrals are done, they're done consistently from one school to the next, because some schools, it looks like that there's a whole lot more referrals than other schools, and I just don't know if there's been enough of consistency of how referrals are done across schools.
Absolutely. That is our tactical approach and certainly connected right back to our initial work in terms of calibration around the application of that code of conduct and supports that need to be provided progressively.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. We have one more thing that we need to do, guys. Our legislative, it is not on there, but it is on there. It is a timing issue because we need to be able to submit these. I'd ask you guys to email Ms. Grabowski your requests, and I think I don't have it in front of me. Okay. Okay, got it. All right. So, any comments other than shortening it? Anyone? Yeah, Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Yeah, I appreciate the process that Ms. Grabowski is using and that you're shepherding forward to prod us to make sure that we're thinking about this in a timely manner. I look very strongly to the Georgia School Boards Association recommendations that we typically see because they have, I guess, a lot of energy and resources to advocate for the priorities that they recommend. So I'm glad to see that we include those, and I don't have any concerns with what we've been presented.
Anyone else? Mr. Johnson?
Just have a question. How many people besides my email, did you hear from everybody, a suggestion, or?
So I did hear from Mr. Johnson to revamp QBE as our main priority, and then also from Mr. Moss for revamping QBE and mandatory and fully funded kindergarten was the other one that Mr. Moss shared.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? Dr. Howard Hall?
As always, age requirement. We've been talking about third grade reading scores the entire morning. However, according to the Georgia, the age limit, the age range is from 6 years old to 16. And we know that third grade is the transition from learning to read to reading to learn, but that's difficult when the state requires that you can start school in first grade.
Right.
So really, it's 2.5 years to be able to learn. So I'm glad to see that's in here, and we need to continue to put it there until that changes.
Now,
All right, Ms. Grabowski.
I'll just quickly state that, this year, I think the more that we can tailor our messaging to our local legislative delegation
Yes.
and demonstrate how it has a direct impact on our district, and that was kind of part of the reasoning for asking about the pre-K numbers earlier, it's a much more personalized approach. So that's something I'd like to be able to work with the staff on pulling together some of that information. And to Dr. Howard's Hall point, again, the pre-K and kindergarten, I'd like us to, my preference, and certainly open to the board, discuss, not that we remove anything from our priorities per se, but that we really emphasize that, getting those kids into, because it has the double benefit of not only improving their educational outcome, but it can also help to address our childcare shortage. That if we get those students in school at pre-K, it's better for the employers, it's better for our students, most importantly, and it also helps. But we need to have the funding to be able to do that, because even at pre-K, we don't get the full funding for those teachers. So, and we also don't have the slots. So I think it's a funding, the slots, and kind of a full package. So would like to do some tweaks if that's agreeable to the board of maybe how we present our priorities.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Now, I will accept a motion to go into executive session. Moved and seconded. All in favor? All right, let's see.